Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that we don't necessarily have to like talk about identity in relation to anything
In particular.
Yeah, but we can refer to where we got our terms.
I think it's important to situate ourselves.
Okay, but sometimes you kind of lead in with the initial question, or and then bring in other things.
Sure, good idea.
Yeah.
So identity is the topic, and we can approach it from whatever direction we want to.
Yes.
Is there somewhere in particular that you would like to begin?
Well, I think in the contemporary moment, I don't know.
Yeah, well, obviously it's like identity has become seemingly the, if not the sole, at least the most important locus of political power. And the fight for power, or for the fight against the misuse of power, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So its identity is up.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm just kind of super high.
Hello. He's camera shy. Come here, kitty, kitty.
He's like, maybe.
Come here, kitty. Hello. Kitty, kitty. Kitty, kitty. Oh, I got something good for you over here. What's this? Oh. What is that?
Oh. Oh. You need some kind of string.
Worthless.
That's not very nice.
Worthless. One of my favorite philosophical questions is, who am I?
Me too.
And the I is the,
I think that's my favorite.
who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like what is nature too, or what is this? Who am I? What is this? I mean, those are both pretty good questions.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to start somewhere, and
Yeah.
maybe we can start with the question of identity.
Uh-huh.
See where it takes us.
Yes. What were you saying? You were saying something about identity in this contemporary moment. At least, and we should situate it right, in the United States, in California.
Right.
But, yeah, it's more than just that.
It's global.
Yeah.
To the extent that people participate in global culture, maybe there's a lot of Americanness in global culture, if you know what I mean, in the sense of the American Empire being the dominant political player
Yeah.
for the last century, maybe a little less since World War II ended, let's say.
Okay.
And this notion of political identity or identity politics really has ballooned in importance. It seems to be among the most important, like right up there with the economy and
Mm-hmm.
climate change. It's like identity, whether it's racial, sexual, gender. It's what people who are passionate about politics tend to feel activated about, right? And why is that? And what is so important about identity? Why does it drive people to feel such heartfelt emotion and the need to protect and defend or fight for the right to even be at all in some cases?
Well, the way that you characterized it just made me think of, I was I read an essay that was, it was I can't remember who the woman who wrote the essay, I don't remember her name, but it was about identity politics and thinking with Charles Taylor and thinking about the good, I think. And she was just, I feel like one of her conclusions was that the importance of identity politics.
Who's this?
I told you I can't remember, but we can at the end of this, or like in the
show notes.
Yes, we can include it. I'll find it because I wrote an essay thinking with this woman who was thinking with Charles Taylor, and but she said that identity politics is really important when there is some identity that is being oppressed, and there's the need for individuals who, you know, intersectionally fall within that identity to come together, even though they're very different people, but they are all united in this, you know, like being black, and so then there's like an identity that is articulated, and it serves essentially like trying to realize a just social body for that group.
Yeah.
But once things go beyond just that, then it can potentially become reified, and I think that is when it can become then it can become almost
abstract,
oppressive for the individuals.
Right.
Like, I think a lot of people, like for example, I think queer has become something that a lot of people identify as because maybe they felt like gay or whatever the categories that had existed before were too stereotyped. I mean, at least I've encountered people who think those things, but it's not necessarily the case for all people who identify as gay, so it's complicated. Yeah. But anyway, but I guess what is kind of lying behind everything I just said is that that there's like this kind of, you know, as you would, I think, describe it, the process aspect of reality has us, you know, being much more than one group, and so anything that kind of binds us becomes unhealthy, insofar as identity is concerned.
Yeah.
So there's something about prophilicity that kind of...
Prophilicity.
Yes.
We should define that word in a second, but that's a new topic. It's the same topic, but new wing of the exploration. I want to just highlight what you said about, which I liked, that identity is almost forged. The importance of it, the reason people respond in defense of it is because it has been oppressed.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a social condition of oppression by some dominant group against a particular marginal identity. Actually brings, it almost helps to awaken the consciousness of the people who identify that way, as like they realize, I'm whatever it is, I'm black, I'm gay, I'm queer, I'm trans. It the pressure from society to conform, and the specific oppression against a particular, as soon as the dominant society says that's wrong, that's deviant, that needs to be brought back into line, those people who were kind of just exploring something now all of a sudden turn around and be like, oh, you're trying to attack me, we need to gain solidarity and stand up for what we are. But sometimes, like, the name of what you are, even the characteristics, sometimes, maybe we can get into specifics, but it seems like there's a way in which the dominant group almost helps to create the character of the identity that the minority who identify as that almost have to adopt on some level and say, yes, that's what I am.
Yeah.
But they also have their own contribution to make to who they are, of course, but there's this dialectic.
Yeah, it's like the terms are provided by the foil.
Yeah.
Kind of, not completely.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and I think that's interesting. Yeah.
And so, I mean, one thing to do would be to help people who are members of whatever oppressed identity, and they all intersect in different ways, so we're not just part of one group, each of us, like you were saying.
No.
But maybe part of the challenge and the thing what we can contribute to help move this dialectic forward would be for all of these marginalized identities to be empowered to discover their own way that they want to be, instead of taking on the projection of the society that was oppressing them.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's kind of the, that would be the ideal for any situation. That nobody is constrained by any kind of stereotype. And that then people are liberated into like a real freedom.
Yeah, how do we do that? Because that's not what identity politics seems to be taken at large.
Yeah.
And they have, especially I think in the...
Well, I think a lot of people are like, what's next? After like justice.
Yeah. It's not, I just wanted to say, it's not that, I mean, the term identity politics, I believe, comes out of black feminism in the 60s. And the need to say, hey, we're not just black, we're also women.
Yeah.
So intersectionality is born then too. But that was an important moment of awakening to the need to politicize identity that did win, I think, more rights for that group.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that if there's an issue with identity politics that it's all bad. It's just to say...
No, it's a necessary reality.
A necessary reality, but it's not enough.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I think that is, like, ultimately understood or recognized by, I think that's the big issue.
Yeah.
It's like a transcultural issue. It's a metaphysical issue. Yeah. I think that you asked the question, I think, like, what... said something kind of basically asking what do we need or what comes next, right? You said what
next? I think you said what comes next.
Oh, yeah, I said that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that freedom means it means many things, but I think ultimately it means for us today the capacity to turn towards the divine or to turn away from it. Yeah. And I think we need to turn toward the divine, and that means so many things.
Yeah. So you're saying we need more God in our politics?
Well, God and also all kinds of other spiritual beings. Not just God, but God.
Divinity. We need divinity in our politics.
Yeah. We need all, yeah. We need to be like turned toward, and there needs to be some kind of movement or affirmation of our pre-existence and after-death existence.
Okay.
And our connection with the dead.
You're right. Oh, the dead too, yes. And, I mean, as Plato and Socrates would have said, we need to connect with the dead, but also understand our own selves as in some way already dead.
Yeah.
So this is identity, right? The question, who am I?
Yes.
If the question to who am I is limited to this body, well, there's nothing wrong with the body. The body's great.
Yeah, but you mean this personality? That's
this
how I like to say it,
personality,
because it's related to the body, but it's not just the body.
Right. This empirical self, this being who we think we are because our mom and our dad and our friends and our society told us this is who we are.
Yeah.
If we're limited to that, not that there's anything wrong with that. That's the ego, or that's the persona. That's the It's the surface self, and it's an important part of who we are.
Yeah.
But it's not. it's not all that we are, and this is the divinity part.
Yeah.
Who am I really?
Mm-hmm.
That's not deeper than just the superficial self. If it doesn't connect to something transcendent of our local historical, social condition, psychological condition, then we're gonna, if our politics is only based on the superficial self, of course we're all gonna be greedy and selfish and
scared,
short-sighted and scared and fearful and angry, and so that's where we're at, right? We've so separated church and state, I guess, on one level, which in another way needed to happen, but we've so removed the sacred from the public and the political. They don't even know what we're arguing with each other about anymore.
Yeah.
So how do we bring the sacred, the gods, the divine,
I think...
how do we bring the depth dimension into our identity politics?
Well, I think more people need to, try and integrate their experiences with their everyday. So like more people need to live out of their non-ordinary experiences and integrate them into their everyday life. Because then I think people would be more compassionate.
Yeah.
And because I think that like who we really are has the capacity, we have the capacity from that like knowing that to relate to our personalities, our, this in this particular incarnation, as if it were our baby.
Yeah.
And then we would look upon everybody else as like, well, unfathomably divine, and they're with their baby.
Yeah. That's beautiful, yeah. Yeah. And I think this is actually like a way of thinking about this as part of the problem is the patriarchy, and it's lacking this feminine dimension and this mothering dimension, the lunar dimension of like, look, your superficial self, your surface self, your empirical being is just a baby, and it's scared, and if you don't have a contact to, and if we don't give each other permission to baby ourselves or mother ourselves and baby ourselves, then we can never forgive each other, we can never forgive ourselves, we can never learn, because we pretend to be adults instead of acknowledging that we're still...
Yeah, we pretend to just be bodies.
We pretend to be just bodies.
Yeah, I think it's like the soul, there's like something kind of archetypally, like when we are like standing in our soul and relating to our impersonalities from a soulful place.
Yeah.
But then that's like a kind of soul that also knows that there's spirit.
Right.
Yeah.
How did this get forgotten?
Well, I personally find compelling an account of this development by Rudolf Steiner, who suggests that the evolution of the consciousness of the human being has is correlated to the evolution of the cosmos, and that there's been this development from a very he describes it as atavistic clairvoyance, basically that human beings of the past had like a kind of unmediated, uncomplicated, well, maybe not always uncomplicated, but communion with the divine.
Yeah.
And also that the universe and the human being were less dense. Like, we're more dense today than human beings in the world of the past was. It was more fluid, and that the like almost like causal relationships between the human and the world were more fluid.
Yeah.
Where now
So
they're
things are more
fixed,
bounded, right, and like distinct, separated.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so he says there's been this, basically he has it in a U shape, and we're like at the bottom of the U, where there's basically been this kind of now what was being given basically in the communion between the human beings and the divine is no longer just given.
Yeah.
And so what we're left with are these old traditions that have become like they're not alive anymore, they're dead. Not all of them, and this is what Steiner thinks. But I do find it compelling that that idea that there's something about the time that we live in particular where we don't have that access, and we basically have to rebuild it for ourselves. And it's not just out of our own effort. It involves grace and assistance by the spiritual world.
But we're in this period of isolation from what we used to be immersed within.
Yeah.
We're still immersed, but we're not conscious of our immersion.
Yeah. Here's another picture that Owen Barfield actually gave. And Steiner, actually, I was listening to a lecture today, and Steiner said something actually very similar. Basically, the older form of participation, he describes as like, there's like this original plant, and we're the seed, and we were a part of the original plant, and now we're separated, and we're just a seed, and we're alone. We're not in the plant anymore, but we have the potential to grow with the earth again. Mm-hmm. But we're just kind of an isolated seed right now, or so it seems.
Right. Well, I mean, a seed is the child of earth and sky, and emerge out of that.
That's beautiful.
It's not really alone.
Think about it that way. Yeah.
It just doesn't know it's in the womb still.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so it's kind of, you could relate that to patriarchy.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so we forgot that we are spiritual beings because forgetting that is a necessary part of the evolution of consciousness to move through this period of seeming isolation from the divine so that we can discover our freedom.
Well, that's what people say. But it's complicated, right? Because we could say that, there are remaining indigenous traditions all over the world that have maintained their traditions.
Yeah.
Some, have striven very hard to maintain their traditions, in wake of genocide and colonization. So that's like, it's a complexity that I don't feel like I have really confronted by these thinkers I'm talking about. So that's sort of our confrontation.
Yeah.
Not confrontation, but we're being called to recognize the time that we live in, and the morality that we recognize, that we cannot just say that, like what Hegel said. What did Hegel say about the slaughter bench of history?
Well, you get the impression reading Hegel, his conception of history, everyone admits that it's bloody.
Yeah.
And full of this strong defeating the weak in many cases where it was clear that there was no sign of justice, or it wasn't guided by the good. It was just
kind of
exploitation, taking advantage, the powerful taking advantage of the weak. But Hegel tries to read history as a teleological, providential unfolding, whereby the means are horrific, but the end is glorious. And so it kind of makes it seem like the means are justified by the end.
Yeah.
Or the means justify the end, and the end justifies the mean. The means. And so, Hegel I think, is typical of the 19th century European imagination of the world.
Yeah.
And that is, obviously in need of
I would say
foundation.
Still think that there could be a teleological unfolding, but not one that precludes human freedom and evil. So
right, you can't just fold evil into history as a means to the end that is good. I mean,
then that just makes freedom is meaningless.
Yeah, especially if the end is a very provincial view of the human as like a Central European constitutional monarchist or whatever Hegel was imagining the Russian state as. Because history is not over. It didn't end with what Hegel proclaimed as the good for which all of this horror was justified.
Mm-hmm.
The history has continued to unfold. I mean, clearly European civilization imploded upon itself in the 20th century. So the 19th century comes to a close, there's all this hubris in Europe about technology, and we have colonized the whole world, and science, and it's the world, we're the masters of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it took most of that century to get rid of slavery, but then the effects of racism are still with us even in the 21st century. So the European Enlightenment project totally failed.
Uh-huh.
Epically failed. So even though, democracy and individual rights and human rights, these things are part of what the Enlightenment was striving for, and we still value those. That's why we take identity so seriously. It's like, I have rights,
Yeah.
So that's something that I guess we can say is still a successful legacy of the better parts of the Enlightenment. But in terms of its own self-conception and self-image, Europe's self-image, like, the shadow just totally reared its...
Yeah, that's what the surrealists were all about. It was like a post-World War I phenomena, and they were just like...
Yeah, this is crazy.
Yeah.
We're crazy.
Well, but they were very anti-capitalist and anti-colonial, and they were just like rejecting everything.
So...
And trying basically to reach the spiritual world. That's kind of how I understood Andre Breton.
Yeah, surrealism.
Like
it's almost
automatism
and surrealism. Maybe is it like the rational Western version of shamanism, like in the sense that they were trying to...
They were like, I wouldn't call it shamanism, but they were definitely trying to regain a relationship to, what shamanism is related to, I think.
Yeah.
But it was, I guess I didn't experience the things, but it was conflicted. There's not like a... Andre Breton had his point of view, but there were very different people involved.
Yeah.
Had very different ideas.
So
it was a very dramatic group.
Yeah.
I liked reading about it.
Yeah. Kind of...
Pro-felicity.
Oh, right, we have to get back to that. Pro-felicity. So what's this philosopher's name again?
Hans-Georg Müller.
And it's Wandering... What's his channel called? Wandering something.
I can't remember. Look here.
But yeah, he posted a video earlier this year in response to Abigail Thorne's, one of Abigail Thorne's videos.
Carefree Wandering.
Carefree Wandering.
It's called.
Yes,
I like that.
He's like a Taoist, or he's into...
Oh, that makes sense.
Taoist
Okay.
philosophy, right?
Yeah.
So he posted this video about Philosophy Tube, Abigail Thorne, actually referring to one of her earlier videos before she became Abigail, or came out as Abigail, I should say.
Yeah, just before.
And it was about Kant, and he was like,
and not the best interpretation of Kant. But then in light of Abigail's transition, it was like, interesting opportunities to talk about identity. And pro-felicity is a word that Muller came up with.
Yeah, he's like juxtaposing it to authenticity. Maybe juxtapose isn't the right word. He's calling them technologies of identity or something like that.
Yeah.
And that there's sincerity, which is older than authenticity, I guess, and is related to more like the way in which we develop identities in relationship to family members or like our role in society. It's like more traditional. Then he describes authenticity as being especially related, at least to the 20th century. I think it would probably be related to modernity at like a kind of emergence of modernity. You could tie it to romanticism and the art in general, and but also he says there's like the family for sincerity. That's kind of like a generic description. It could be different.
Yeah.
But then for authenticity, the I guess correlate is the true love. Romance, yeah. Basically. It's like the other,
right?
Your true love. And then for pro-felicity, it's your online peer or something like that.
Right, like the general audience.
Yeah. But it's a peer, so he was emphasizing that. It's because I guess somebody asked if that was kind of like a Lacanian, like the big other or something like that. But yeah, pro-felicity is the idea that, in our time, with the way that the internet has saturated everything, that pro-felicity is like, so he describes authenticity as, he relates them, and he kind of gives this description that is inverted for authenticity and for pro-felicity. So I think what he says is that with the authenticity, you want it to be like an original experience or something, or there's something you like authentic behind the presentation. Whereas I think with pro-felicity, it's like the first presentation that counts. I don't think I'm describing it very well.
Impression counts more than the depth of the.
No, it's more, okay, so pro-felicity is more like you're pretending to become an identity. In order to become an identity, it's not what you authentically are, you build it basically.
Right.
And so that's the difference.
I see.
Yeah. And so that's sort of related to the online experience.
So the romantic artist seeking authenticity is going into their own depths to give expression to who they truly desire to be.
Yeah.
And the pro-felicity monger is trying to construct, based on what the audience wants, an image of who they could be, but it's not really driven by any deeper sense of
well, it's complicated because he says that these technologies operate, they can coincide.
Yes.
And that they are especially doing that right now because I think he was saying we're like transitioning.
That's why technologies might not be the best word for it because I guess computer.
I feel like we'd have to read his book where he's describing it.
Sure. Yeah. We
would understand better.
We don't want to fall prey to
misrepresenting
or commodifying philosophy, but dumbing it down too much.
Yeah, so we haven't read his book, so we don't know everything.
But he made YouTube videos
about it, and he was describing it, and we're doing our best to work with it. But I think it would be important, and he probably does this in his book, to root this authenticity paradigm in some kind of philosophical movement.
Well,
and I would associate it with romanticism, and so then we would have to talk about metaphysics, and if these are kind of interchangeable, then we would have to talk about, well, what kind of metaphysics allows for that, or
Well,
do we agree with that
They
metaphysics?
overlap, right?
Yeah, they overlap.
They're not interchangeable.
Yeah, well, they're not interchangeable.
You
They
can't
overlap.
just do pro-felicity without some of, because I was trying to describe them as separate, but
Yeah.
you've got to have some romantic conception of yourself. But the media technologies that we have, social media, screens, cameras, blogs,
Yeah.
Twitter, YouTube, whatever, Facebook, they take the romantic self and the authentic realization of who we are. It's like, you know, everyone's an artist and they make themselves or whatever. In the context of our current media environment, it's like it almost puts that on overdrive or something, because you're like potentially always on camera.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, oh, I could be on camera right now. This is gonna be on someone's Facebook profile. I have to look
Well, then, yeah.
like my profile would want me to look, or like you know, like the imagined audience would
I
expect.
have to produce this.
Right. Everything's under production.
Yeah.
We're all celebrities in our own little.
And that's what he was, Hans Georg Muller was, when he made this video that was related to, what is that YouTuber's name?
Abigail?
Abigail's video about coming out. He was just pointing out that Abigail was saying, "This is the real me," or something like that.
Yeah.
But while performing, so, and then of course she was aware of this. So there's like this kind of, this like simultaneity of the idea of authenticity with the pro-felicity or the performative identity. But I think the author, you know, because he's interested in Taoism and Chinese philosophy, that he does actually emphasize, I think, that ultimately, like, our identities are, you know, like flowing, right? And they're not fixed. And, or at least maybe to, like, really be in tune with being, then we ought to comport that way.
Yeah, well, I mean, that gets back to the question of...
So the pro-felicity is kind of like a recognition of that, whereas authenticity can be like, almost like, for him, I think, it can maybe be felt as something to like measure up to that's actually not real. I'm not sure if he thinks that, but...
I mean, if he's a Taoist, everything ultimately resolves into emptiness or nothingness, which isn't the same as like European nihilism, but it's not
at all.
It doesn't.
I mean, maybe Christian apophatic or mysticism. Yeah.
Right, but there's also always the cataphatic side, and I know for like Lao-Tzu and Chuang-Tzu, there's also the manifest,
the affirmed,
the positive, which in the figure of Christ, that would be like, or the Jungian self, it's a form of wholeness that's not other than the Tao.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's just the affirmative side of it, I guess. And so maybe Muller or the Taoists in general wouldn't want to dismiss the notion of identity outright.
Yeah.
Even if it's not exclusively.
Sort of,
obsessed by it. And so when we talk about divinity, it's not just in a theist way as like the divine being or personality. It's also the divine nothing. The divine emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
So like, ultimately it remains a question always, who am I? We don't know. We don't know. We won't ever know. But we can still become.
Yeah, I remember when I really first started asking myself that question, and it just seemed so bottomless.
Yes. That's what relieved me of my 7-year-old self's fear of death when I started asking, because it led me to that question, like, well, okay, I'm going to die, well, what am I? Who am I? And then I realized there's no bottom to that question, and so death became more mysterious than just as like a dead end. I realized, wait, I can't be sure it's an end.
Yeah.
Basis for that belief.
Yeah, I have more of a basis, not because of my own choosing, just because of my life experiences.
Yeah, the day
To
are still
believe
with
the,
us.
the opposite, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good place to end.
Okay. Goodbye.